I want to talk to you about leadership. Specifically, I want to talk about a foul-mouthed, chemically scarred, fourth-wall demolishing mercenary with impulse control issues, a deeply unhealthy relationship with chimichangas, and absolutely zero interest in leading anyone anywhere, who somehow assembled one of the most genuinely loyal teams in the entire Marvel Universe. Without a strategic plan, without a vision statement, without a single team building retreat or personality assessment or human resources professional anywhere near the situation. And if that doesn't make you deeply, profoundly uncomfortable about the amount of time and money you've spent on your own leadership development, it should. We're talking about Deadpool, first movie, 2016. Rated R for reasons that are completely relevant to the leadership lessons and absolutely not safe for your next all-hands meeting. Let's go. Before we get to Deadpool, we need to spend 30 seconds on Wade Wilson, because this is important and most people skip it. Wade Wilson, before the experimental torture that turned him into a scarred, unlikable, occasionally unhinged superhero, was already somebody. He was a mercenary, yes. Morally flexible, absolutely. But he had a code. He had relationships. He had Weasel, who was his best friend and his bartender and his closest advisor, which tells you everything you need to know about the organizational structure Wade was comfortable operating in. He had Blind Al, a relationship that defies normal description but functioned as something real. He had Dopinder, who drove him around and inexplicably treated every conversation with Wade like a life coaching session he didn't pay for but desperately needed. He had a woman he loved enough to turn himself into a science experiment for. None of these people were recruited. None of them interviewed. None of them showed up because Wade posted a compelling employer brand on LinkedIn with sections about culture and unlimited PTO. They showed up because Wade was relentlessly, uncomplicatedly, sometimes exhaustingly himself, and something real was happening around him as a result. That's not a leadership strategy. That's the output of a person who has never once performed who they are for the benefit of an audience. And that, right there, is the thing your leadership team has been accidentally but consistently getting wrong since the first day someone called it a team. Let me say something that is going to sound obvious and isn't. Authenticity is not a leadership strategy. You can't decide to be authentic on Tuesday morning at your staff meeting and then go back to performing the rest of the week. You can't read a book about vulnerability, feel inspired, share something slightly personal at your next all hands, and then act like you've unlocked authentic leadership. That's not authenticity. That's a calculated disclosure of curated vulnerability, which is authenticity's most annoying cousin and smells like it immediately. Here's the thing about Wade Wilson that makes him genuinely instructive rather than just entertaining. He wasn't trying to be authentic. He was incapable of being anything else. The man had no filter, no performance layer, no vision of himself put on for professional context. What you saw was what you got, at full volume, in full color, with commentary, whether you wanted it or not. And people didn't orbit him because he was charming. I mean, he was charming, but that's not why. They orbited him because in a world full of people performing who they are, performing competence, performing confidence, performing leadership, Wade Wilson was just actually there, actually himself, actually saying what he meant in real time without a PR filter or a carefully crafted message. Weasel didn't follow Wade because of a vision statement. He followed Wade because Wade was the same person in every context, dangerously funny, occasionally infuriating, and completely real. That consistency is magnetic in a world where most people are performing consistency rather than embodying it. Here's the question you should be sitting with right now. Is your team following you because of who you actually are, or because of who you decided to perform, being their leader? Those are not the same thing, and your team knows the difference, even if you don't. Let's talk about how Deadpool's team actually formed, because this is the part that should make every leader deeply uncomfortable about their own team building process. Wade didn't recruit, he accumulated. Each person in his orbit showed up for their own reasons, stayed for their own reasons, and contributed in a way that had nothing to do with a job description or a defined role or an org chart that anyone drew on purpose. Weasel was there because they were genuinely friends and because the bar was his business and Wade was good for it. Blind Al was there because honestly, the relationship is complicated and this is the first movie, but she stayed because something real was happening and she was part of it. Dopinder was there because one conversation with Wade gave him more genuine direction than anything else in his life had managed to provide. Think about what that means. A guy who didn't try to lead anyone, who didn't attempt to inspire anyone, who didn't cast a vision or articulate a mission, or establish core values with his team, accidentally gave Dopinder more functional life direction in one cab ride than most leaders manage to give their direct reports in a full year of one-on-ones. How does that happen? Cause and effect. Wade was genuinely engaged with the people around him. He listened, not as a leadership technique, but because he was actually curious. He gave real responses, not managed responses. real ones. He treated people as if their situation mattered, because to Wade, in that moment, it actually did. Not because he was performing empathy, because he was present. When's the last time one of your team members felt like you were actually present with them? Not managing the interaction, not tracking the clock, not mentally drafting the follow-up email, but actually there. That's not a coaching question, that's a genuine one. And if the answer requires more than a second of thought, you might have your answer. The human element, the most valuable intangible asset in any organization, isn't activated by your HR process. It isn't unlocked by your onboarding program or your engagement survey. It's activated by leaders who show up as real people and make the space for real people around them to do the same. Wade Wilson did that without knowing it was a thing. Most leaders know it's a thing and still can't manage it. Here's the part of the Deadpool leadership argument that most people miss because they're too busy laughing at the chimichangas. Wade Wilson had values, real ones. They weren't written down, they weren't laminated and posted in the break room, they weren't the subject of a company-wide rollout with branded swag and a keynote, but they were absolutely real, absolutely consistent, and absolutely enforced by Wade on himself in every situation that tested them. He had a clear line on who he would hurt and who he wouldn't. He protected people who couldn't protect themselves. He kept commitments to the people he loved, even when keeping them cost him everything, including his face. He was ruthlessly honest, not as a personality quirk, as a value. The things he said out loud that made you wince were things other people were thinking and not saying, and Wade saying them was a feature, not a bug. The standard is not what you preach, it's what you permit. And what Wade permitted of himself was a very specific thing: chaos in method, clarity in principle. He was chaotic about almost everything except the things that actually mattered, and the people around him could feel that distinction even if they couldn't articulate it. That's what real values look like from the inside of an organization. Not a list of words on a wall, a set of behaviors that aren't visible, consistently lived by leadership, especially when living them is inconvenient, expensive, or personally costly. Ajax broke Wade's body. He didn't break his code. That's not a plot point. That's a value architecture stress test, and Wade passed it. Now, be honest with yourself for a moment. When your organization got genuinely tested, a difficult client, a market hit, a personal decision that was expensive to make right, did your team see your values hold? Or did they see them bend? Because they were watching, they're always watching. And what they saw in that moment is what they actually believe your values are, regardless of what the website says. 3 things. No PowerPoint, no framework with a clever acronym. Just 3 things Wade Wilson did without trying that you should be doing deliberately. 1. Stop performing leadership, start practicing it. There's a version of you that shows up at the all-hands meeting, the one-on-one, the client presentation, and it's the more polished, more carefully worded, more strategically managed version of you. Your team's met that version. They've been managed by that version, and they do not trust that version the way they would trust the real one. That doesn't mean you don't show up without preparation or professionalism. It means the goal of your preparation is to show up more clearly as yourself, not less. Wade Wilson was never more Wade Wilson than when the stakes were highest. That's not an accident. That's what genuine character looks like under pressure. Prepare the content, don't prepare the persona. 2. Let your values be visible before they're tested. Your organization's values are either visible in ordinary moments or they're invisible until a crisis forces them to surface. Wade's values were visible constantly in the low stakes moments, in the cab rides, in the conversations with Weasel that had nothing to do with the mission. That's why nobody was surprised when he held to them under pressure. They'd seen it 100 times already. If your team has to wait for a crisis to understand what you actually stand for, you've waited too long. Make the values legible in the daily moments, not through announcements, through behavior, through the small decisions that nobody's writing a case study about, but everybody is noticing. 3. Earn loyalty by being worth following, not by asking to be followed. Deadpool never asked anyone to follow him, never pitched the team, never sold the vision, never said, "I need you on this." He just went, and the people who belonged in that orbit showed up, because what he was doing was real. The stakes were real, and he was real. Loyalty accumulates around authentic action, the way it always does and always has. You don't build a loyal team by asking for loyalty. You build them by being someone worth being loyal to, consistently, visibly, in the ordinary moments when nobody's watching and the extraordinary moments when everyone is. Deadpool did that without a single leadership development course. The question is whether you can do it with all the ones you've taken. Deadpool is not a leadership role model. I want to be extremely clear about that. Do not take anything I've said today as an endorsement of his methods, his vocabulary, his relationship with violence, or his dietary choices. But underneath the suit and the jokes and the fourth wall breaks and the deeply questionable life decisions, Wade Wilson had something that a shocking number of leaders, executives, founders, and managers spend an entire career trying to manufacture manufacture and never quite managed to produce. He was real, completely, uncomplicatedly, sometimes exhaustingly real. And the people around him felt it, and they stayed. Not because he asked them to, not because he gave them a reason to in any conventional sense, but because real is rare and rare is magnetic. And magnetic is what builds the kind of loyalty that doesn't show up in your engagement survey. It shows up when things get hard and your team decides whether to stay or go. The most terrifying thing about Deadpool isn't the regeneration or the katanas. It's that he built something most leaders can't without trying, and you've been trying for years. If you want to understand what a culture built on real values actually looks like and how far your organization is from having one, the Culture, Health, and Toxicity Assessment is in the description. It's free, it's honest, kind of like Wade.